Note to Self by Humayun Mirza. Interior, supermarket, day. Self-service machines malfunctioning. The robot voice repeating its plea for assistance over and over. The queue is longer than expected for Becky Miller, 28. A woman with a trolley tries to jump the queue. Becky alters her stance. The woman looks at Becky, exasperated.
Is this the queue?
Becky purses her lips and nods.
Oh, my life.
Montage. Becky puts shopping into the boot of a car. Becky labors to get out of the busy car park. Becky drives onto a dual carriageway. A car pulls in sharply. Becky brakes and hits the horn. We see the other car drive slower. The driver winds his window down and roars obscenities. The driver tails her, flashing lights and horn blaring. Becky slows down and waits for the maniac to pass. Becky pulls over onto a side street. Her breathing is shallow. She gulps water. She looks at a bottle of prescription medicine. She takes some pills. She takes the shopping out of the boot. Montage ends. Exterior busy city street, day. A tsunami of people emerge from a subway exit. Becky steers through the mob, carrying the bags of shopping. She looks like she's on autopilot. Exterior, suburbia, continuous. She approaches a fine-looking house. Exterior, big fancy house, back garden, continuous. A party is in progress. There are a dozen or so guests. A well-dressed woman, tipsy from afternoon drinking, is telling a story and gesticulating as she does. Becky is trying to radiate calm, topping up people's drinks. She hovers near the other guests. Michael, 30s, notices her anxiety, walks over, and puts his arm around her.
It's not a bad turnout, eh?
Becky is about to say something.
Mikey, shall we get this Barbie going?
Michael nods and goes with the man. The drunk woman spills wine on another guest. Becky moves with quick reflexes.
I'll get some salt in the bowl.
Interior, big fancy kitchen, continuous. Becky is crouching at a lower cupboard. The bottle of salt is at the back, and she has to lean quite far in to get purchase on it. SFX, a distant beep. Her fingers touch the bottle, but push it away. Two women, mid-20s, come into the kitchen. SFX, beep. They don't see Becky behind the large kitchen island.
I could do with a place like this.
Should find yourself a rich hubby. Simples. More champagne, sweetie.
Becky grasps the bottle just as the champagne cork pops. SFX, beep, stronger.
Me and James work all the hours God sends us, but we could never get near a place like this now.
You are in a place like this now, duh. Anyway, Becky's fella inherited it. Being a scientist doesn't get you this.
Some people are lucky.
Becky stands up from behind the island.
Oh, hi, Becky.
What's that noise? Is it an alarm going off?
Becky hands the salt bottle to one of the women as she strides out. Interior hallway, continuous. SFX, recurring beep. Becky sees the cellar door has been left ajar. She opens the door. Stairs descending into gloom. The sound is coming from down there. Becky takes the stairs down. Interior cellar, continuous. A tiny window allows light to struggle through into a typical storage area. Against the wall is a washing machine with its door open. From inside the drum, Becky sees a light pulsing in sync with the beep. She goes over to the wall and switches off the power. The beep continues. Becky kneels and looks inside the drum. Where her knee is touching the ground, we see a dark liquid bubble and froth. Becky stands up and sees that she is sinking in mud. She looks over to the stairs, on the other side of the room. There is deeper water there. Becky sinks into the swamp, loses her balance. She grabs the washing machine to lift herself up, but the machine tilts toward her as it sinks too. Dark liquid floods the room. The muddy water reaches her neck. She gasps.
Michael.
Interior bedroom, day. Becky, 50s, is lying on a bed, struggling to breathe. She's wearing a headpiece that looks like the safety element of a hard hat. She sits up, clutching the sheets in panic. She yanks off the headpiece. Becky opens her eyes, breathing more settled now. She reaches for a bottle of water and takes a swig. The blinds are drawn, making for a gloomy interior. She holds the headpiece closer to inspect. It has a fine metallic weave on it. Becky lets go of the object and gets up. Interior hallway, continuous. The corridor is dark. Some light is emanating from interior living room. Becky looks around the ghostly space, notices a violin. She goes to it.
Come on, Rebecca. Reach. Your parents have paid good money for this.
Becky reaches for the violin and picks it up. She is surprised by something on her hand.
Reach, Rebecca. Reach for that last note.
Putting the violin down, she sees something on her hands. Panicked, she rushes out. Interior bathroom. Becky snaps on the light and is stunned by her reflection. She touches her face, which, in the harsh light, looks flaky and withered. Her hands go to her hair. Clumps of silver hair fall into the sink. Her hand goes to her mouth, as if to be sick. She gags into the sink. Something rattles against the porcelain. Another wave of panic hits her as teeth fall into the bowl. Exterior industrial site, day. Becky, 20s, jolts awake. She's lying in a sleeping bag, looking grizzled, like she hasn't washed in weeks. Becky is wearing the headpiece. She sees a hooded figure approach. She tenses, sinks a little into the sleeping bag. The figure stoops and pulls back her hood. This is Dr. Lynn, 40s.
How are you, Becky?
Becky shakes her head, confused.
You want to come with me, get some hot food and a drink?
Becky seems lost.
You should stop using that thing.
Becky touches her head where Dr. Lynn is pointing. She grasps the headpiece and takes it off. Flashback, interior laboratory, day. Becky, 40s, is looking at an image from an electron microscope. She makes some adjustments to a tool on her desktop, and we see the mechanism interact on screen. She clicks some buttons, and a tray ejects from the microscope's chamber. The headpiece is on the tray. Back to present. Becky shrugs off the sleeping bag, gets up, and moves away, standing at arm's length.
We failed. It's not your fault.
Becky runs. The industrial site is a maze. She turns a corner and comes to a fence. Her hands go to the chain and lock. The hands of a 10-year-old pull on the fence. We hear the aggressive barking of a dog. Becky, 10, turns and sees a Rottweiler charging toward her. She tries to squeeze through the gap in the fence. On the other side of the fence is another girl, a bit older, pulling on Becky's arm in desperation.
Becky, come on!
Becky is in tears, wailing. The dog is almost upon her. She screams. Interior laboratory, day. Becky, 40s, is writhing in a padded chair. She's wearing the headpiece, which is attached to exposed metal wires and long snaking cables. Dr. Lynn is holding Becky's wrist. The doctor turns and speaks with a nurse, but we don't hear her words. Becky moans. Dr. Lynn and the nurse look at the display monitors. All the neural maps are disintegrating. Interior meeting room, day. Dr. Lynn is sat at a table with a few associates. Becky, 40s, is there, shaking her head.
How can you withhold funding?
Until we see an improved data set, risk management won't be able to release additional funds.
How can we improve the data without testing?
An impetuous move into human trials would affect the market value, your careers.
I'll sign a waiver.
You already did.
What?
Becky looks at Dr. Lynn.
If we succeed, we'll change the face of neurotherapy.
The man looks at the tablet display before him.
If
Becky looks at his fingers as he gestures through images of cars on his tablet. His nails are long and dirty.
and your family, your friends. What about them if you're a vegetable? Who would cover the cost?
Droplets of black oil fall onto the tablet screen. She looks up at his face. His head is a ferocious knot of tentacles, mechanical in texture and form. A hole appears where a mouth should be.
You are alone.
Becky sprints to the door. Tentacles reach out and trip her. She falls and is dragged back by the monster's form. Pinned down by the weight of the entity, she suffocates. The monster pushes down harder onto her body, the crunch of breaking bones.
No one can help you.
Exterior, beach, day. Becky, 20s, is floating in shallow water. After a moment, her body sinks to the bottom. We see small hands reach down and grab. The hands pull, the motion of the water helping some. Child Becky drags adult Becky to the edge of the water.
Breathe.
Adult Becky's eyes flicker open. She splutters and convulses, throwing up water. She screams with anger and sorrow. Becky cries. She sits up and exhales. The ocean rolls out. Becky inhales. The ocean rolls in. Becky repeats deep breaths, relaxed now, watching the ocean in sync with her breathing. She sees a violin floating in the sea. Interior meeting room, day. The entity is feasting on Becky's lifeless body. Becky's hand shivers with life. The monster pulls back as Becky exhales. The violin bow is in her hand. She runs it across the monster's face. The entity retreats further, snarling. Becky brings a violin to her chin and plays with the same dreadful imprecision she did as a child. The monster starts to spasm with pain. Becky plays with determination, almost hitting good notes on occasion. The major scale sounds awful. The entity shrinks. Becky towers over it now, playing with relish. The monster dissolves into a wine stain on the carpet. Exterior industrial site, day. Becky, 10, stops crying, wipes her nose. She turns to face the Rottweiler, which is just behind her. The dog is growling. Becky holds out a hand and the dog sniffs it. She moves closer and pats the dog. Interior bathroom, day. Becky, 50s, stands before the cabinet mirror. After a moment, she looks down at her hands. She's holding the headpiece, the metal glinting in a harsh light. She puts the headpiece on. Interior laboratory, day. Dr. Lin and a nurse are watching over Becky, 40s, still plugged into the machine. They notice a change on the displays, the neural maps pulsing with color and becoming more defined. They move closer to Becky, Dr. Lin taking her pulse. Behind them, on the displays, the neural maps glow. Dr. Lin and the nurse embrace. Interior, big fancy kitchen, day. Becky, 20s, walks past the two jealous women, putting the bottle of salt down onto the counter. The cellar door. SFX, sound of water bubbling and frothing. Becky opens the door and takes a few steps down. The staircase is much longer and there's no light at the end. She turns and closes the door. The sound of her footsteps recede into the lower world. Fade to black.